Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we pull all the most important nuggets of knowledge from a stack of sources just for you. Today we're plunging into something pretty huge, really shaking up the AI world. You've probably heard about Meta's recent investment, right? Over, what, $14.3 billion in scale AI?
That's right, for a 49% stake, value scale at $29 billion. It's massive.
And Alexandr Wang, Scale CEO, he's now also leading Meta's new AI superintelligence lab. It's quite a development.
It really is.
So it makes you wonder, why would a giant like Meta, they train their own huge models, why make such a massive investment in a data company?
Exactly.
It feels like this move makes Meta's path to AGI, well, crystal clear. It really starts with data, maybe even more than compute.
That seems to be the signal, yes.
So yeah, in this deep dive, we're going to explore Scale AI's really fascinating journey. Its founder, Alexandr Wang, and what this whole deal tells us about where AI is heading.
Right. So our mission for you today is really to unpack that journey. Scale AI, from its pretty surprising start to its absolutely pivotal role now in shaping the most advanced AI models. And we'll even touch on how it's redefining things like the future of work and global competition. Our sources for this are recent discussions with Alexandr Wang himself, plus analyses of Meta's strategic move. So you're getting a bit of a behind-the-scenes look here.
Okay, let's get into it then. Lots of college students, they really look up to Alexandr Wang, the MIT dropout who started Scale AI. But what's the real story? Where did it all begin?
Yeah, it's interesting. His story actually starts before MIT. Back in 2014, 2015, he was at Quora, software engineer. And even back then, he noticed something. Machine learning engineers. They were already making more than standard software engineers. A clear signal, right?
Interesting. Even then.
Yeah. But the really pivotal moment came when he was just 16. He went to these summer camps, kind of organized by the rationality community in San Francisco.
Oh, right. I've heard of those. For really bright kids.
Exactly. Precocious teens. And there, he got exposed to this idea that AI, and particularly AI safety, might be the most important thing he could work on in his lifetime. I mean, who was saying this? People like Paul Christiano.
The RHF guy.
The RHF inventor, yeah, now at the U.S. AI Safety Institute. And also folks like Greg Brockman, Eliezer Yudkowsky. Big names.
Wow. So that seed was planted really early.
Definitely. So fast forward, he's 18 at MIT studying AI deeply. But he gets, as he puts it, antsy, wants to build stuff. So he applies to Y Combinator. And their first idea, it was 2016, the height of the chatbot bubble.
Ah, yes. Chatbots were everywhere.
Everywhere. Their idea was chatbots for doctors. He calls it a funny idea now. Young founders, kind of mimetic ideas, maybe a poor sense of alpha, not quite knowing their unique edge yet.
Okay, so chatbots for doctors.
Yeah.
Clearly not what Scale AI is today. How did they make that crucial pivot? What was the spark?
Well, they're in YC watching this chatbot boom, right? And they see, okay, these bots need tons of data. And not just data, but like human effort, human elbow grease, as he called it.
The labeling, the training.
Exactly. So, almost off the cuff, the idea comes up. What if you just did the data, the human data, for the chatbot companies? And boom, that's the concept. An API for human tasks, or API for human labor.
An API for human labor, that's quite a phrase.
Isn't it? They bought scaleati.com like that night, launched it within a week on Product Hunt. The tagline was literally that. The insight was realizing the human part was the bottleneck in scaling AI, and they figured out how to turn that into a product, an API.
And that caught on.
Yeah, it captured imaginations. It was this kind of weird form of futurism, Humans doing work for the machines, not the other way around.
Yeah.
That got them their early funding.
So that niche idea, API for human labor, gets them started.
Right.
But where did they go from there? What was the first big wave they rode?
So a few months after launching, it just became obvious. Self-driving cars, that was the first major application.
Right, the AV boom was just starting to heat up then.
Exactly. And this led to a really big decision for them. Focus narrowly on self-driving. Now, some investors were worried. Too small a market, they said. Can't build a gigantic business.
Yeah, I can see that concern.
But Wang felt differently. He thought, no, this is much bigger than you think. All the funding flowing in, the automotive programs, plus the existing tools like Amazon's Mechanical Turk. They were apparently awful to use. Bad API, clunky. Scale saw an opening for something better.
Okay, so better tech, focused market.
Right. And he tells a story about another YC company, right? They just reached out through the website,
Yeah.
maybe connected through a former YC founder, who knows? But basically, in the blink of an eye, Cruise became their biggest customer.
Wow, just like that.
Yeah. So focusing on self-driving, even if it wasn't going to be the long-term gigantic business, let them build the core business very quickly.
Yeah.
It just shows, AI is this incredibly dynamic space. You have to adapt, make those strategic pivots.
Definitely. So they proved the model, built the business in self-driving.
Yeah.
But then the generative AI tsunami hits. That must have been another huge shift. How did Scale navigate
Oh,
that?
absolutely. It was a massive shift. See, in self-driving scaling laws, the idea that models just get better with more data compute parameters wasn't the main focus.
Why not?
Because the models had to run on the car, compute was super constrained, so engineers were optimizing for small, efficient models, not giant ones.
Got it. Edge computing constraints.
Exactly. But then, 2019, Scale starts working with OpenAI. This is the GPT-2 era.
Okay, pre-hype.
Right. GPT-2 was, mildly impressive, but more of a curiosity. Then GPT-3 drops in 2020. And that was when, according to Wang, sailing laws clearly felt very real.
The change was that noticeable.
Apparently so. He tells this story, a personal Turing test moment. He gave a friend early access to GPT-3, and the friend got visibly frustrated and angry at the AI, but in a way that felt somewhat personal. Wang realized then, okay, this is somehow qualitatively different.
Wow. An emotional reaction to the AI.
Yeah. And while GPT-3 was the glimpse, he says DALL-E, the image generator, was what really convinced everyone about generative AI. But the real at-the-farm moment, as he calls it the moment, everything changed for Scale. And really the whole world was 2022. You had DALL-E, InstructGPT, which was the precursor to ChatGPT, and then, of course, ChatGPT itself and GPT-4. That prompted this big shift. Companies just scrambling to pivot in 2023.
So that's when the analogy really clicked. Scale AI as like the NVIDIA for data, the essential plumbing for this new era.
Exactly. GPT-4 really cemented that. It showed that the need for data will basically grow to consume all available information and knowledge that humans have. Think about that. It creates an astronomically large opportunity for a company that provides that data infrastructure.
Yeah, that's mind-boggling scale.
Right. And GPT-4 was also the first time they really saw a zero hallucination experience, at least in limited domains, a new level of reliability. The key thing now, he points out, is that model improvements aren't just about pre-training anymore. It's about reasoning, reinforcement learning. There's a new scaling curve emerging.
So it's not just bigger, it's smarter, more reliable models. And that all comes back to the data.
Precisely. Carefully curated, labeled, high-quality data becomes even more critical.
Okay, so this vision, it really changes how you think about business advantage in the age of AI. What does this mean for companies, especially, their intellectual property, their secret sauce?
Yeah, Wang has a very clear blueprint for the future here. He thinks every company's core IP, their real value, won't just be their code anymore. It'll be their specialized model or their fine-tuned model.
Like the way code bases are proprietary now.
Exactly. And the unique advantage, the moat around their business, will come from the data and environments that are somehow specific to their particular problems. Things only they have access to.
Specific data is the moat.
Right. But there's a tension, he notes. The big model companies, they want access to evaluation data to benchmark and improve their foundational models. But individual companies, maybe like YC startups, see that evaluation data as their moat. It reflects their unique problems and performance. Giving it away would be like, well, giving away your code or your customer database.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that.
No way. So Wang sees these things, evils, data, specific environments, as the new bright lines, the critical boundaries of what's proprietary. And this plays into that debate. Is AGI going to be like one giant Borg mind or a specialized economy? Wang falls firmly on the side of a specialized economy. He thinks alpha, competitive edge, comes from being able to capture your unique business challenges and data sets and using those to build differentiated AI.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, shifting gears slightly. What about jobs? There's so much anxiety around AI taking jobs. Wang seems pretty optimistic, though.
He really is. Very techno-optimistic. He acknowledges that work fundamentally will change, absolutely. But he strongly believes humans own the future, and we have a lot of agency in how this plays out.
How does he see that working?
He uses coding as an example. We're moving beyond just AI assistants helping programmers. We're moving towards a swarm of agents that can do more complex tasks.
Okay, so what's the human role then?
In that paradigm, he argues, the last job is essentially being a manager. You're managing the agents, directing the work, setting the goals.
Managing AI agents.
Yeah. And he pushes back against the doomer view. Management isn't simple. It's about vision, strategy, debugging when things go wrong, putting out fires, complex stuff. He mentioned an engineer who, when asked if they wanted more compute or more people to manage, immediately said, more compute.
Huh. I can relate to that feeling. Managing people is hard.
Right. It highlights the complexity. And even look at self-driving. You still have remote assistance, right? Humans overseeing multiple vehicles, maybe 5 cars to 1 teleoperator. Humans are still in the loop.
That's a good point. Continued involvement.
Wang fundamentally believes in insatiable human demand. As the economy gets hyper-efficient, thanks to AI, new demands, new desires, new kinds of work will emerge. He sees that as a reliable trend for the history of humanity.
Like how the job computer used to be a person.
Exactly. Or think about the Apollo missions teams of humans crunching numbers. Those jobs changed. His point is, pre-AI, programming felt like alchemy because of the incredible leverage it gave one person. He thinks the entire human workforce will soon see that kind of large leverage boost. And that he finds extremely exciting.
That's a powerful way to frame it. Leverage for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, so Scale AI itself has obviously had to keep changing, keep reinventing. Can you trace that strategic evolution for us?
Yeah, it's been quite an arc. So the first 3 years, like we said, laser focused on producing data, mostly for self-driving cars. But a really key thing about their business, he says, is they had to build ahead of the waves of AI.
Ahead of the waves. What does that mean?
It means the demand for their data often showed up before AI really took off in a particular industry. Like, they started working with OpenAI on language models back in 2019. They were working with the Department of Defense in 2020. They were engaging with enterprises well before the current generative AI hype cycle.
So they had to anticipate where AI was going.
Exactly. He compares it to NVIDIA. They have to be ahead of the curve because AI is just fastest moving industry ever. They need the infrastructure ready before the demand fully materializes.
Okay, so that's the data side. When did the shift into applications happen?
That started around late 2021, early 2022. They moved into building applications and agentic workflows for enterprises and governments. They could do this because their core data business, their data foundry, is highly operational. It gave them the foundation and the insight.
So it wasn't just about providing data anymore, but using it to build solutions.
Right. And Wang draws this really interesting parallel to Amazon building AWS.
AWS. How so?
Well, back then, an online bookstore launching a cloud computing service seemed kind of nonsensical, right?
Yeah, a bit out of left field.
But Amazon had the conviction that cloud computing would be an infinitely large and growing market. Scale had a similar light bulb moment with AI applications. They realized every business and every organization was just going to have to reformat their entire businesses with AI-driven technology. So building AI applications became, in their view, an infinite business opportunity.
Infinite business. Wow. So what's their application strategy now? Are they trying to do everything?
No, quite the opposite. Their current strategy is actually to focus on very specific, hyper-narrow markets, but with the absolute top-tier customers in those markets. Think like the #1 pharma company, the #1 telco, the top bank, leading healthcare system, the U.S. government, DoD.
Go deep with the leaders.
Exactly. And that focused approach has already built a multi-hundred million business just in AI applications. And it's all fueled by their unique advantage, their differentiation coming from the data side.
Interesting. Does that put them in competition with someone like Palantir? They also work with big government and enterprise, focusing on data?
It's a natural comparison. Both are tech providers to large orgs, data-focused. But Wang sees a key difference. Palantir, he says, is often solving the messy data integration problem, getting all the disparate systems talking to each other. Scale, on the other hand, focuses on the most strategic data that will enable differentiation for your AI strategy.
So different layers of the data problem.
Kind of. He actually says they often partner rather than compete directly because the market is just so infinitely large. There's room for both. Ultimately, he believes the real bottleneck in AI progress isn't compute. It isn't even just raw data. It's really great, technical, smart people who are optimistic and actually work really hard.
The human talent bottleneck.
Yes, and his bet is that AI agents are going to explode that bottleneck by giving those smart people immense leverage.
So if they're building agents for customers and believe agents of the future, are they using them internally, eating their own dog food, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely. They saw the insane efficacy of reinforcement learning for agent deployments really early on because they were producing the data sets for model developers building agents.
Right, they saw what worked.
Exactly. So they started thinking, okay, how can we apply this internally? They look for repetitive human workflows, things people do over and over. Things like parts of the hiring process, quality control checks, data analysis tasks, sales reporting. If they can define it as an environment and generate data for reinforcement learning, they try to automate it into an agentic workflow.
Can you give a specific example?
Yeah, he mentioned distilling candidate packets, resumes, notes, feedback, into concise briefs for the hiring committee. That's not just simple text summarization. It requires what he called deep research plus plus. Clicking links, pulling info from different places, blending it, analyzing it. It's complex,
More than just prompting a language model.
much more. He says while prompting is good, reinforcement learning gets you beyond that level for these kinds of really complex, multi-step, end-to-end tasks. So yeah, they're definitely applying it to themselves.
That makes sense, turning inwards with the tech. Okay, let's talk about evaluation.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier this need for hard evils and this intriguing thing called humanity's last exam. What exactly is that?
Right. So the AI industry, Wang argues, suffers from a lack of very hard evils, benchmarks that really push the limits and show what these frontier models can actually do in terms of reasoning, not just pattern matching.
Okay, so how is humanity's last exam different?
It was built with the Center for AI Safety. The idea is to collect deviously hard scientific problems from recent research papers contributed by really brilliant scientists. The key is these problems are designed to be unsearchable on the internet. You can't just Google the answer. They require deep expertise and genuine reasoning ability.
Wow, okay. Unsearchable problems. How are the models doing?
It's pretty fascinating. Initially, model scores were really low, like 7, 8%. Yeah, truly hard problems. But they've rapidly improved. Scores are now over 20%. And get this, the models are even starting to request more thinking time.
Like compute time?
Yeah, asking for the evaluation window to be extended from, say, 15, 30 minutes to maybe even a full day to work on the problem.
That's incredible. The AI needs time to think.
It really is. So the core idea behind humanity's last exam is, yes, it's a test, but it's also a tool to drive progress. By creating these super hard, unsearchable challenges, they're giving researchers a target, a North Star and yardstick, pushing them towards fundamental breakthroughs in reasoning.
But won't the models just eventually learn to game this test too? Like we see with other benchmarks, that benchmark saturation problem.
That's definitely a risk, yeah. Eventually, any static benchmark can become saturated. But for now, it serves that crucial purpose of pushing the frontier. And speaking of the frontier, there's a real belief, Wang shares this, that new scientific breakthroughs could actually come from these AI reasoning models within the next, say, 12 to 24 months.
Really? AI making novel scientific discoveries.
Yeah, especially in fields like biology, maybe, where the data is complex and models might spot patterns or have intuitions humans miss. Think about what AlphaFold did for protein folding in chemistry. That's the kind of potential.
A future where AI does the R&D.
And scientists maybe work to understand and verify the AI's discoveries. It could be a really exciting time for science.
Okay, but this capability, it also has huge geopolitical implications.
Right.
Especially the competition with China. How does Scale AI and Wang view that dynamic?
Yeah, it's a major factor. He points out the somewhat awkward reality that some of the best open source models in the world now come out of China.
How is that happening?
Well, could be various reasons. He mentions the possibility of, insights, tricks, maybe hyperparameter intuitions making their way out of the frontier labs in the West. Espionage is a complex factor.
So the gap is closing, or closed in some areas.
Current U.S. proprietary models are likely still ahead, maybe a half step behind China's best on some open benchmarks, but it's dynamic.
Yeah.
He says it's tough to model what'll happen when it's truly neck and neck.
Mm-hmm.
And there are critical factors that play into this race.
Like what?
Well, energy production, huge one. U.S. total grid production, basically flat as a pancake. China's has doubled, mostly coal, unfortunately. He calls it a policy failure for the U.S. You need massive energy for these models.
Right. Energy is fundamental. What else?
Chips. U.S. still has a clear advantage there thanks to export controls and domestic manufacturing pushes.
Okay.
Data. This is where China is fundamentally very well positioned. Different approaches to copyright, privacy,
Yeah.
plus massive government data labeling programs like 7 dedicated centers, college programs, voucher systems.
Wow, a national effort on data labeling.
Yeah, and large-scale robotics data collection factories, too.
Yeah.
He even notes that some U.S. companies rely on Chinese data for training their robotics
What
models.
you say?
It is. Then algorithms. U.S., historically more innovative perhaps, but espionage and rapid knowledge sharing can even it out to some extent. And finally, hardware, specifically manufacturing things like robots. China has an incredible manufacturing advantage. Robot costs might be 4K there versus 30K in the US. That's a very big problem, especially for defense and national security applications.
That cost difference is huge.
Hmm.
So how does this play into defense? You mentioned scale works with the DoD.
Right. This leads to the idea of agentic warfare or agentic defense, the old Cold War, thinking of just building bigger bombs. That's kind of out. The future, he suggests, is about smaller, more nimble, attritable resources. Things you can afford to lose: drones, embodied robots, cyber warfare tools.
Okay, swarms of cheaper, smarter systems.
Exactly. And right now, military decision-making is often remarkably manual, which leads to limited information and slower responses. AI agents could change that completely, enable perfect information, almost immediate decision-making, leading to conflicts that move at an incomprehensibly fast
This
pace.
sounds terrifying, honestly.
It's a profound shift. And Scale AI is directly involved here. They're building a system called Thunderforge with the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. It's a flagship DoD program. What it does is convert human military planning processes, which are governed by established doctrine, into a series of agents that work together.
Automating military strategy.
Essentially, yes, turning critical decision cycles that might take 72 hours now into potentially 10 minutes. Creating what he calls an unrelenting form of warfare. The need for chain of thought, understanding how the AI reached its conclusion, is critical here, of course. But the observation is that these advanced capabilities, they open over time no matter what you do. You can't really put the genie back in the
A lot of
bottle.
this is just, it's a mass transformation across the board, business, science, defense. So bringing it back to Alexandr Wang and Scale AI,
Mhm.
after this incredibly deep dive into their journey and the implications, what's the core piece of advice? For someone trying to navigate this, trying to succeed, he seems like such a hardcore founder, such deep expertise. What's his takeaway?
It's actually incredibly simple but profound. His singular advice is you just have to really, really, really care.
Really care.
Yeah. He talks about the folly of youth, how when you're young, everything feels astronomically important, and that intensity drives incredible effort, incredible attention to detail. He referenced an old blog post he wrote titled, "Hire People Who Give a Shit."
Huh. Straight to the point.
Totally. He explains the difference between people who just phone it in versus those who feel their work is so incredibly monumental and forceful and important.
Yeah?
He genuinely believes this magnitude of care is the single greatest indicator of success.
How so? What does caring translate to?
It drives everything else. Deep investment in the problem, learning faster, adapting quicker, holding yourself and others to incredibly high standards. He uses himself as an example, apparently. He used to review literally every single hire at scale. And he feels it personally very painful if a customer is unhappy. That level of personal investment.
That's intense.
It is, and it connects to one of their company values.
Yeah.
Quality is fractal, meaning high standards at the top have to trickle down within an organization. It starts with really, truly caring. So yeah, the core insight isn't some complex technical strategy. It's that fundamental passion, that deep level of caring. That's the engine, he believes, for breakthrough success, especially in a field moving as fast as AI.
What an incredible journey we've taken. Seriously. Through Scale AI's whole story, Alexandr Wang's early insights that pivot from chatbots, their role in self-driving, and now, being right at the center of this generative AI wave. This deep dive, it really shows how the foundation of cutting-edge AI is just so much about data, isn't it? And these specialized models and this complex dance between human intelligence and these emerging AI agents, it's really a story of constant change, constant reinvention, all built on understanding the power of data.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought for you to consider, as AI keeps evolving, pushing that frontier of human knowledge, maybe even making its own scientific discoveries, and as those lines blur between what humans do and what agents do, think about not just what gets automated, but think about how our very human abilities, our desire for vision, for solving complex problems, for managing that complexity, how those things will shape this future that's accelerating so incredibly fast. How will your unique human insights combined with all this new leverage from AI, how will that redefine what's even possible?